Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having an amazing day today. Today we're taking a look at the first book in the Corum, the Coming of Chaos trilogy that's collected here in this Borelius Legends collection, which I'll link to you in the comments below for you folks. It's called The Knight of the Swords. It's 151 pages and starts on page 8. So it's not even 150 pages for it. I read it over the last 3 nights for you folks. It took me about an hour. I did about 50 pages each day, and it took me about an hour and 15-20 minutes or so for me to knock it out each day. So it was around 4 hours. You could easily read it in a day in just 1 4 hour sitting, or 1 hour a day, 4 days, or in 2 days and 2 hours a day, that sort of thing. So you could easily knock it out very, very quickly. A lot of Michael Moorcock's stuff from the 60s and 70s, his novels tend to be pretty quick, and you can read them without a whole lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff happens. So it's very well paced, very well plotted, and so forth. Michael Moorcock used to be my favorite author when I was in junior high and high school. After I discovered his work, R.A. Salvatore was previously the Tritz Jordan series from Forgotten Realms was previously my favorite author after discovering Tolkien in the 5th grade. In my summer between the 5th grade and the 4th grade and 6th grade years, I read The Hobbit and then The Lord of the Rings over the summertime, and he became my first favorite author, and then R.A. Salvatore my second after I started reading the Drizzt stuff, which I've done reviews for you folks. And then after I discovered Michael Moorcock's Elric series, in the Hawkmoon series, which I've reviewed some books for you folks. I have gone back and reread a few of his things a couple of times, especially the Hawkmoon stuff. That's my favorite series. And the Eternal Champion series. And this book recollects all of his stuff that he had ever published in a big giant series. What he does is in addition to creating the word multiverse, which is very common today, he has this big giant pan-planar battles between law versus chaos. And the law versus chaos things that are happening are the key central concept, if you will, between the two things. And there is a character called the Eternal Champion on every single plane, a different incarnation, and he will adventure and against the forces, for the gods, against his will, and so forth. So Corum is that character for this plane. And there are 15 planes in the nearby area, and we will refer to it as the 15 plane area, and so forth. So what's going to happen in this telling, which I read when I was in high school, and I picked up this collection from Borelius, and I'll link you to it in the comments below in case you're interested in checking it out further. It's a lot of fun stuff that's happening. Basically, what's going to wind up happening is that he is a member of a non-human race called the Vazhag. He's going to find there are men running around that are multiplying and so forth. They call themselves Mabden, and so we'll use the term Mabden for humans moving forward. And then they are coming about and so forth, and they haven't been, and they're seen as kind of beastly from these advanced elder races that Corum is a part of, and so he is a prince of a castle that now just doesn't have as many people as it used to back in the old days, and he's a long-lived race, as are his people, and so forth. So he is sent by his father, who's about to die, the king, and in order to go and send his regards to his relatives and so forth at nearby castles and areas in the land that owns to the Vazhag. And so he's going to head on out and do some studyings and so forth, but very quickly on, he's going to realize that the Mabden have been taking over the world in the land that was owned by the Vazhag. So in like 2 or 3 chapters in, he is going to see the big giant herd of Mabden and running around and so forth. In his first area, it's just been burnt down. The first castle that he was being sent to has just been taken over and burnt down, and everybody there was killed by the Mabden and this big giant army that he's coming across, and so forth. So that's sort of the centralizing thing about 5 or 6 chapters in, and these chapters are very short. They're like 5 or 6 chapters in. He is captured by the army, and then he is tortured. His eye, his left hand are cut off. and so forth. And about 40 or 50 pages later, they are replaced by body parts from gods. The eye and the hand are replaced. That are remaining from these brother gods that were rivals, and all that was left after their rivalry was over was the hand of one and the eye of another. And those will give him powers that will enable him to seek out his revenge. So there you are. That is sort of the beginning. I keep my reviews spoiler free for you folks. So I'm going back and reading this series for the first time since I read it in high school. I was picking up these Borelius collections at a pretty quick clip as soon as they were released. I was by the next one that was collecting my favorite authors' series into Big and Giant stuff by Michael Moorcock for you folks. So that's the Knight of Swords. So what do I think about it? So what I think about it, I like it. I like the ending. I think it's fun. It's fast. It's well paced. The combat scenes are nice. He doesn't spend a whole lot of time with talking and descriptions and so forth. It's been hundreds of pages, right, and so forth. And I like the brevity of this. I think it's good. Michael Moorcock calls himself a bad writer with good ideas, and he says he'd rather be that than a good writer with bad ideas. And that's his self acknowledgement. And so forth. I would give this probably a solid 8 out of 10. He's a classic person. His stuff is heavily influential. The law versus chaos concept was heavily influential things that came in fantasy world. That are his sort of his introduction to that law versus chaos dynamic. You would see, for example, in the early game Dungeons & Dragons, a fantasy role-playing game that was the first role-playing game published in the 70s by Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. The central archetype isn't good versus evil, but it's law versus chaos, which comes from this. Also, two early artifacts are the Eye of Vecna and the Hand of Vecna, two body parts of something that you can put on to replace your lost body parts of the hand and the eye. And those are the only two parts of the body, and those are the two parts that Corum has, and I'm probably sure that probably came from that too. I would be surprised to find that out at all. Also in Appendix N, in the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide in 1979, Michael Moorcock is listed as a key influence on that sort of thing. So he's definitely a key influence and so forth. His biggest influences are Elric and the Sword Stormbringer, which I've done some reviews for you folks. But this series is less so. But he is a fun thing. There's a trilogy here that's collected in this. There's a second trilogy, too, all of which are still small stuff. They're very fast reads. You won't take a whole lot of time. I mean, look at this. That's about as thick, right, as a regular modern day novel, right? Right, especially with the oversized. But I was blowing through it. I knocked it out. I knocked out 150 pages. I was expecting it to probably take me more like an hour and 45 minutes because I was expecting it to be 30 pages an hour. And 50 pages would be closer to like an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. But I blew through it because there's a lot of chapter breaks and so forth in there. So it's very fast, very easy to read, very easy to get into. Loved it lots. So I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. So there you are. I'm going to go ahead and leave you to it. The channel's name is The Worst Thing About New Books. A quote by a French philosopher, Jacques Joubert, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old books. And so the books that are written back in the 60s and 70s, decades and decades ago, are definitely older books that we need to make sure we're taking a look at for you folks. Have you read The Nine of Swords? If so, what'd you think about it? Let's talk about it in the comments below. If you agree or disagree with my 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed this, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more to follow. Then finally, I just want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it in watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.